Can't really explain why I got so choked up, but but it happens.
I
And I'm
think it's
praying.
because the moon is in Cancer.
Yeah, maybe maybe that's it. It was like, oh, I was thinking about this beauty of this, mother figure that we have in the heavens, and I just get so so moved. So yes, you're right. That's a good observation. Okay. Let me, that's not what I want. Oh, yeah, let me see if it'll, okay, it's gonna share my Zoom page and then, okay, I'll give it to the moon page. All right. Okay, so this is more about the magic of the moon. And one of the things that as I was reading, I don't know, it came to me or my guides told me, and this may be obvious, was that the moon really teaches about, the earth is in relationship to the moon, right? They're in a relation there. It's like that seems obvious, but like it's more dynamic and more intricate, it's like not just the earth and the moon's revolving around it. They're actually in a synergistic relationship. And the moon, I believe the moon teaches us about ourselves through our relationship with other, just like we learn about the earth through our relationship with the moon. Um, the moon, there are, many benefits of working with the moon's energy, not just doing the moon wheels, but for any purposes. Um, I really started to see how the healing rhythm that, the attuning to the rhythm of the moon can be so healing, just not necessarily just through the way we use the moon wheels as self-reflection, but as a way of regulating our time, our energy or just like me crying at the prayer or whatever, right? The moon is such this underlying rhythm, and I think reconnecting to it can give us that really comforting and healing sense of attachment to something, to a healing energy larger than ourselves. I think working with the moon, helps us to work smarter, not harder, because we work with the timing of the moon. Definitely, this is more personal about this work. Working with the moon increases our self-awareness, our self-love, and self-acceptance as we work with that soul self. Working with the moon helps us develop your intuition, helps you develop your intuition. I think, the moon's related to intuition, and it's also because we become more self-aware and we have more cognitive awareness, sense of self, that we start to feel more, right? And we get a greater sense of feeling, and so that increases our intuition. The moon teaches us the art of transmutation, and particularly for this work, it's generally we're talking about transmuting painful patterns into, something that we're working on, or strength or resilient or some type of new blessing in our lives. And I also think as we learn about ourselves, the moon is empowering in the sense of the more that we know about ourselves, the more empowered we are. And I think not just in terms of both in terms of our light self and our shadow self is what I want to say, because as we do this work and do this self-reflection, right, we learn so much more about our gifts, and we learn so much more about, what we're good at and what our strengths, and so we learn a lot about our power and our creativity and how powerful we are. And then we also see the parts of ourselves that might be neglected or need nurturing or healing. And then we also have the opportunity to do that, to work with that part of ourselves, which is also empowering, right? I would say one of the most disempowering things is when you have something outside in, in your subconscious, or you don't know it, right? And it's controlling your life and you don't know what it is, right? That's one of the most disempowering things, is when you see a pattern happening or whatever, and you can't figure out why it continues to happen. That feels disempowering. So as we work with looking at ourselves, we become increasingly empowered. Just to give you a sense of this week, the sun moved into Aquarius on Saturday. The moon will be full on Thursday at 10:54 a.m. here in Arizona, and 12:54 for you, Barbara, in the afternoon. And still I'm just keeping on there, North Node in Aries. So we're, this whole year is about what do we want, and then really feeling that Mars sense of adventure and courage and boldness, and capitalizing on that, or whatever, harnessing that and making the changes right in alignment with what we want. And it is I encourage you to be selfish with it, okay, so I divided my talk on the moon up into the 4 levels of the temple. So the literal, symbolic, paradoxical, and then I'll talk about the full moon again at the end. So the moon was formed. Okay, so this is some of the science that I had to update myself on. The moon was formed, the moon and the earth were both formed from one body. There was an earth before a collision event happened with this other planetoid, Theia, about 4.35 billion years ago. Theia collided into the earth, and a piece of the earth split off into the moon, and they began to rotate together in a system. And they're not binary planets, but they're, the earth is the planet and the moon, but they are sort of like a barbell, where one of the weights is the bigger and then one's a little smaller. So there's a center of gravity somewhere in there where they rotate around, but they rotate in relation, rather than just thinking that the moon rotates around the earth, which is what I've always told you. They actually work together in their rotation, and the moon has a pretty significant effect on the earth as far as regulating that, right? Like, the earth has slowed down the days, like let's say 4 billion years ago, the days were really short. And as the moon and the earth have worked together over these billion years, the day has gotten slower, our night and day. And it's affected the tides. And then, like I was saying about the evolution of this, species and creating the earth. So really the moon has been this influencing body as far as the seasons, the rotation of the earth, kind of where the axis is, the way that the earth does the seasons because of the tilt on its axis. All of that is modulated and regulated by the moon. And so you can kind of see how that would support life and growth, and this, the cyclical rhythm that we go through is very much, even the seasons are regulated by the moon. So I mean, I think that's really phenomenal. Oh yeah, Angie.
I just have a quick question. I had no
Yeah.
idea that the moon was part of the earth, and I had no idea about that. But are there other planets that they have found, like the other planets that have moons, the same thing happened? The moons are part of that planet, or is that just indicative of Earth?
I think they don't know what I was reading in this book came out just recently, and I was like, oh, this is exciting. I found this Science Friday article about it. So they don't, it'd be hard to know without, I think that's why they want to go to Titan, and why there's like this excitement about going to maybe one of Jupiter's moons, or because the way that they found out that the moon was the same material as the earth was because they gathered the moon rocks on the moon landing. And they didn't know that, there was a theory Actually, Darwin's son came up with a theory based on the tides that the moon had been separated from the Earth. His theory was a little, incorrect in the details, but his overall theory was right. And then when they landed on the moon and started analyzing the material, the rocks, they discovered that they were made of the same material. And then perhaps some of this third body, Thea, that, caused this cataclysmic, disruption. So yeah, I think that's really, I just think it's interesting when you think about it being like part, you know what I mean? Like they're kind of, right, we're in this aura of the moon, right? It's hard to even separate how it's hard to think about the moon as a separate body in that way, right? Because they're in this, gravitational orbital relationship where they're really synergistic, working so synergistically together, the Earth and the moon. And then, obviously we know that the moon's tidal effect, we know that the moon affects the tides, and then the tides gave rise to life. And so this was one of the other science facts that I thought was interesting. There's a lot of work going on biology now to find, this is a pretty recent discovery actually, that I had texted some of you about this, about this circulunar. So, we consider it a fact, right, that we have a circadian rhythm, and we think of that as, I guess, based on the Earth day, but science has also discovered, primarily in marine animals, but there's other animals and plants, that a lot of life usually has two rhythms. They have a circadian rhythm and a circulunar rhythm. So like there's these sand crabs that know when it's night or day, and they also know when the tide is high or low, and they come out, right, because if they got swept away in high tide, they would drown. So many animal species they're discovering have a circulunar rhythm that goes on the tide goes on a 12.4-hour rhythm. So it's slightly different, and which is one of the reasons why we see the moon, we see the moon come up. If we look in the south, it's like here, and then the next day it's here, because the moon is off of our day by approximately 50 minutes. So we're seeing it, we're seeing it go, right? We don't see it in the same spot every day, which, but a lot of animals know that. And there's a guy that studies plants, and he's found, he was so amazed when he discovered that plants move their leaves according to the moon and the tides, that he's studying now in the International Space Station plants. And even though it's only a 45-minute rotation around the moon, or, with the space station with the moon, it's like the plants still move their leaves based on the moon. So these plants that he studies. So I just think that's phenomenal evidence of this relationship we have, and this, like I say, circulunar rhythm that we have. Oh, and one more point about humans was there's some cool research going on in Europe, in Switzerland, by chronobiologists, which is about time, timing. And they have found that our sleep patterns are indeed, they could measure how much our sleep was affected, and they were able to get rid of the light. It wasn't because of the light, it had something else. They had to do this complex experiment. They didn't tell them they were studying the moon, and it wasn't because of the light. It was, they figured out it was something else causing this sleep, shorter sleep at the full moon, longer sleep at the new moon. So it's exciting that there's, like I say, we knew this, but
I know, good to know I'm not the only one.
There's
Sounds
no
so
science.
very
It's so interesting, the energy of a full moon. It just hits me like crazy, So
Yeah,
I think for me, it's like this vibrational energy that I'm attuned to with the moon, especially on a full moon. It doesn't have anything to do with the light because I have blackout curtains in here,
yeah, it's something else. It's the
Yeah.
energy. Yeah, it's so, yeah, so, yeah.
I don't sleep as well during the full moon.
Yeah.
Or as long or whatever. It's very weird.
Yeah, Yeah, and I mean, I'll get some pictures of this next time, but the diagrams, they're exactly like the sleep patterns are exactly like the moon cycle drawing, of following,
why.
the sleep patterns follow the moon cycle. Like, it's amazing.
Whoa.
Yeah,
That is-
and then okay, and one more thing I think that so I always have talked to you about the moon reflecting the light of the sun, but I actually didn't know that the moon also reflects the light of the earth. And maybe this is a more recent phenomenon because we're giving off a lot of light. But when we see the moon, you know how when the moon is new, or if you get up early when the moon's like a balsamic and you can see the disk, you can see the whole disk in the shadow. You're actually seeing the reflected light from Earth off of the moon. That really blew my mind because I was like,
Wow.
if you think about it symbolically from an astrology point of view, on one hand, we see if you think of the sun as the spirit, we're seeing this reflected light of spirit. But then to think of like the moon reflecting the light of Earth and how we see the reflected light, we really truly see the reflected light of ourselves and our humanity in the moon. And that just like, so
Can I ask a question? Do you mean
yeah,
like, when you see the outline, like say it's like a new moon or whatever, but you can
yeah.
see the outline, that's actually the earth, not the moon?
You're seeing the moon, but when you can actually kind of see it, how sometimes it looks like it's almost like you can see in the shadow. You see a little bit of that reflected light from the Earth's, because there's so much light, electrical light and stuff. You're seeing the reflection of light from the Earth bouncing off the moon. Yeah, so that circle you're seeing is the moon, but because you can kind of see it, you're seeing reflected light back from the Earth, which I think is really, like, kind of mind blowing. But
Wow.
yeah, so on the symbolic level of the moon is still about reflected light. In the Kabbalah, or I'm sorry, in the tarot, Paul Case, who was a American occultist, talked about the moon symbolizes the reflected light of the subconscious. We talk a lot about that. These are this is the symbols related to the moon. Silver is the mineral element related to the moon. And then I would say water is of the four elements related to, the element related to the moon in terms of the four elements. In astrology, the moon can represent the soul self, the emotional self, the mother, generally the mother, unless you have a very nurturing father, your subconscious. It also represents the etheric in the chakras, like in the energy levels. The moon brings, this is from vibrational astrology, the moon brings the past into the present. So this rhythmical energy of the moon, I would say this has to do with our silver chakra, our soul self, moves that soul self such that like stuff comes up, right? Like waves, sometimes it's happy memories, sometimes it's sad memories, sometimes it's past life stuff. Like it's moving this stuff in and out of our conscious awareness. And I put the reflection of light. So, I'm still kind of wrapping my mind around the fact that that we see the light of the earth and the moon. So I was like thinking about the full moon, like when we see, it's not obvious to us because we're seeing all that light, but we're seeing the sun's light because the sun and moon are in opposition, but we're possibly also seeing reflected light of the earth on the moon. You just would be drowned out by the sun's light. You wouldn't see it. But so, when we're looking at the moon, it's more obvious at the new moon. It's not obvious at the full moon, but it is obvious at that new crescent, like when the early, like you were saying, Angie, in the early, when the moon comes up, like the first few days of the month. And you would see it in the morning too, if you we're watching the moon at the end of the moon cycle. So I touched on this before. I think there's a symbolic, I guess I would say this is like the archetypal mother, you know, the moon symbolizing the mother. The moon, maybe this is not symbolism, I don't know, but maybe this is paradoxical, but the moon teaches us how to regulate ourselves through rhythm and routine. Even the 6th house in astrology, which is ruled by Cancer, is about daily routines and supportive routines. And I'm going to use an example. I used to work with grandparents who were raising their grandchildren for the University of Arizona. And in a lot of the situations, the parents gave up their kids to the grandchildren because of drug substance abuse as a whole. And so what would happen with the kids is generally, you know, some in the more challenging cases, the kids would have disrupted attachment. You know, they would have anxious attachment or you know, avoidant attached or dysregulated attachment. And I think the moon, you know, as a representation of our emotional self or subconscious self, the moon can also show us the path to healing that, let's say, dysregulation as a psychological term, right? How to get us back into regulation, because ultimately attachment patterns can be healed if you can bring back that rhythmical, right? You can bring back that regulation. Those attachment patterns can be healed, right? Through attunement and security, right? But you're attuning to someone's, it's a human to human, right? It's through a relationship, but you're attuning to their rhythm and whether they're consistent, right? So I think this is a fascinating healing aspect about the moon, this idea of rhythm, not just the monthly rhythm, but the daily, this kind of underlying rhythm that the moon brings with it or helps us regulate. And the moon, I think it was Pliny the Elder who referred to the moon as the timekeeper. It might have been Plato, but there's a lot. I hadn't really, even though I knew that the modern calendar had been created with the solar year and the lunar rhythm, if you think about, like, say, hunter and gatherer societies before agriculture, they used the moon to really mark the days or when to travel. I found a lot of this in the biology, in the moon study of animal, you know, that there's a lot of animal behaviors that rely on the moon, like, you know, butterflies and birds that rely on migration during the full moon, and humans, you know, what nights to travel. So the moon became this real, like, concrete. And, you know, if you think about a year without the moon and it's just one day after the other, it's really hard to imagine like what that means one day after the other. But the moon was really the timekeeper for humanity as far as understanding the rhythms and to measure time and to figure out what to do when, like predators, you know, hunt in the new moon, when to travel, when to stay home, when to do this and that, when to fish, whatever. So I think that's also interesting about how important our sense of time is connected to the moon. So I left this one sort of blank. I kind of want to more discuss with you the paradoxical. I do think we work, okay, the paradoxical is the irrational. If you think, okay, these 4 levels of, in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, the 4 levels of the temple was the literal, you would learn the literal. So you would learn, you know, say you would learn the literal stories. That was like the first 7 years of education, kind of like the way we think of maybe elementary education starting at the age of 7. Then the second 7 years of education were the symbolic. So maybe that would be middle school through high school. Then after that, you would study, your work would be in the paradoxical realm, which is really about learning about yourself, learning out how to apply the symbolism, learning to know yourself, learning to know, like you say, your gifts, but also perhaps your shadow or your weaknesses. And I think that is really the level of which we do this moon work, the way in which we so deeply self-reflect. Yeah, this work is paradoxical work. And if you look at the body, I don't have a good drawing of this, but I'll put it in later. The paradoxical is related to the heart chakra. The lower levels of the temple are below, like you can't see me, but below your diaphragm. and the creative level of the temple is, throat chakra and above. But we're really working with the heart, which is the nexus between, the lower chakra, I don't want to say lower or higher, but between, let's say, the more physicality of the red, orange, yellow chakras, and then the more spirituality of the upper chakras. And also the lower chakras tend to hold our past in more, our past experiences more, and then future experiences are more related to the upper chakras. And the moon's kind of in the the heart is in the present. The heart chakra works in the present. So I wanted to just kind of think through with you. So, okay, it's paradoxical to me that we must be in relationship to get to know and understand parts of ourselves through reflection, right? Like, if you think of any relationship that you're in, Barbara, with your sister or children, and Angie with your daughter, or right, Francesca with your mother, or any, right, any relationship with we're in, romantic or parent, right? We learn something about ourselves. And I think the moon is the moon is like a relationship that we have, I mean, the moon's definitely a relationship with the earth, and we're in relationship with the moon. And so we can work with that to learn about ourselves. And through this reflection, it's challenging. I mean, again, like I said before, it's the hardest things are the ones we grapple with, where we can't understand what's going on, or why we're blocked or inhibited or in pain, and we don't know why. Those are the hard parts. And often it is our relation, right? It's our close, intimate relationships who help us mirror, right? Who can see it, or who are listening to us, who care about us, who can see it and mirror it back to us. The moon works in a very similar way in that kind of relationship as our close, intimate relationships. So I want to think through the moon cycle with you, and how we see that rhythmical relationship on the paradoxical level. So at the new moon, I want you to think about, like, there's the sun and the earth and the moon. They're all lined up in the sky, and the earth is in the mid. The moon is in the middle. And if we could see the moon, because it's blocked by, the sun is so bright, we can't see the moon, unfortunately. But if we could, because we can see this, and then, we could see the reflected light of the earth. If you could see the moon, you would see the reflected light of the earth. And so that's really amazing. So what happened, what is the paradoxical of this alignment of, let's say, the spirit self, the soul self, and, our conscious self that we are here on earth, where there's an alignment of those, right? They're all in conjunction on the new moon. And we work with, that is where we do our seeding and where we do our listening, because of that alignment that they're in. And so I want, so I guess I wonder on that, like, what, what is that energy? It's interesting because we don't see the moon there. I told you a couple of weeks ago that the full moon, paradoxically, we work with the shadow self, right? But here we're working with the light self, but we don't see the moon, right? It's just that it's not obvious. Okay, and then at the first quarter moon, if you think about sunset, and the moon is the sun is at sunset on the west. We're here on earth, the moon is directly overhead, and they've created this angular relationship of a 90-degree angle. And so we work with that as an active, right? This active relationship. It's the moon is half lit by the sun. So let's say the soul self is partially lit by the spirit, and then the other half is in shadow. But again, if we see any of it, we're seeing the reflection from the earth. So we're seeing ourselves and the light at the same time, like in equal proportions. And that's where we take our action. So I'm walking you through this because I'm trying to wrap my head around the paradoxical, but it's paradoxical, so it might not work just as a thought experiment. Okay, and then the full moon, right? Again, we see it on the horizon. I always find it fascinating that we experience the moon on these horizons, but again, because the sun is setting and the moon is rising, we generally first experience the full moon as it's coming up. So the moon is on the east, the sun is on the west, and the moon rises. There's probably something to think about there, like in terms of medicine wheel, west, the sun is setting in the ending, right? The ending part, right? The west in Egypt was considered the part of endings. The east, because it's where the sun rises, is a part of new beginnings. So in the full moon, we got the sun setting as an ending, the moon rising as a beginning. And again, we're in the center, right here. We're in the earth is in the center, and we're trying to navigate what's happening between the spirit self and the soul self with this reflection. And then at the last quarter moon, we see the moon in the morning. And this time the sun is on the east and not in the west like we see it in the night. And the moon is at the top, at the midheaven. And again, that's an active relationship, and another square relationship. Okay. All right, that's what I got. I don't know what to tell you about I guess there's something interesting there going on with like the self, and maybe even when's the beginning, right? Like, okay, the soul self, I'll give you one example, right? The beginning, we see the beginning, we're aware of the beginning of the new moon when it starts to rise in the west, right? The west is where the west in the moon, the medicine wheel is the lodge of silence. It's like, it's the woman's lodge, right? And we see the moon rising from the woman's lodge, from this place of silence, from, like, if you read a bunch of Dine folklore, this is where things end, but that's where the moon begins, right? We see it in the west. It goes counter. We see it rise through the sky counter to the sun, right? It's opposite the sun. And we see it through the whole thing. And then at the end of the moon cycle, near the end, we see the sun rising again, and the moon is completing its journey. So I think that's interesting, that the development of our soul self is opposite, right, of the spirit self, right? The way that we think of the sun. So, okay. There's some paradoxical food for thought. That was more of something I wanted to just kind of dive into and see what came out of that, because the paradoxical is really more of a experiential learning. Like, I can't really tell you, I can tell you what I know about the paradoxical, but right, you need to engage with it with your heart, right? You're going to engage with the paradoxical through your heart chakra and through your life experience. It's hard for me to articulate that. Oh, and I forgot to add the creative. In a similar way, the creative, okay, not in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, not everybody became a priest and worked in the creative level. Many people would stop the paradoxical tests were so challenging that most people stopped at the symbolic, right? They got the symbolic knowledge, they prayed, they didn't go on. But if you wanted to be a priest and do the higher creative work of the priesthood, you had to go through the paradoxical level before you could go to the creative. Before you could really understand the mystery of Great Spirit, you had to work through the paradoxical. So, so the creative level, it's very personal. I know I've talked about like your mystery, whatever draws you to the moon and to this work, you're on the path of that creative level of the temple, right? You're on, right? Your relationship to your spirit, your soul self, the moon, and however this work speaks to that in you, that's the right? That you're touching that creative mystery of the moon in yourself. It's a very personal, right? Because my sense of mystery with God is going to be different, right? Like to use an example that I know, like Angie, I think the mystery touches her through, Vedic tradition and Hindu stories. And, mine's much more, a lot of my memories of God and mystery have a lot to do with ancient Greece and Egypt and different lives. And, so each of us are going to have these different ways that we connect with the mystery of God, and the moon and different lives, whether we were, I don't know, let's say witches or other practitioners, herbalists, witches, anybody who gardened with the moon or whatever. So, right, that's going to speak to you differently based on your soul lives. And then finally, the moon. So the moon for this week, we work with the moon this week in the full moon as a magic mirror. When we do the wheels, or when you do your wheel, you're drawing your wheel with the 4 parts of self, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and the directions are right, they're meaningful. And we, I think, okay, we really work with this high energy, like Angie talked about, this, like, it activates us, or there's just this high energy of the moon, and we take this reflecting light of the moon, because it's a full moon, and we look inwards. We do the self-reflection, and we're like, okay, it's easy because we are attempting to put things into motion for ourselves with the new moon and the first quarter, right? We're really looking at, well, what's going on with, like, I asked, I've asked for this, and this, and what's going on. I would look back to my new moon wheel and say, what's going on with this? Is the energy moving, or is it stagnant? Am I having success, or is there resistance? And almost like you were an anthropologist going to another culture, you're going to look at yourself to see what's really happening, and hopefully have some insight and illumination about and intuition about what to keep nurturing, what to keep growing, and what needs to be removed from your garden. What needs to be cut away, what isn't working, what isn't in harmony with all that you are asking for. And so that's the kind of stuff you're putting in your full moon wheel is, okay, I'll use myself. I've been kind of putting in my moon wheel that I wanted to be 175 pounds, but I hadn't really been doing, I had gone on the adrenal diet in the last summer, and I lost about 10 pounds or 7 pounds or something, but I wasn't really taking any action. I wasn't really doing anything, maybe I cut out some foods, but I wasn't really being very proactive about it. So this month I started a liver, through a naturopath in Phoenix, a liver cleansing diet that helps. It's a healthy one. You eat a bunch of food, but it cleans out all the like the fatty liver syndrome and all this stuff going on in there. And I'm having success with it. So hopefully by Thursday, I'll still be having success with it. But it just, you know what I mean? To kind of look at what you're at, you know, definitely look at your seeds, look at your life, and look at what you're asking for and then what's really going on, because it is hard to see sometimes or whether or not we're in alignment with what we're asking for, right? Is it in alignment with our is it in alignment with your values? Because I've heard a lot lately that, like, if it isn't in Scott's taking this budget course, and he talks about if your budget isn't in alignment with your values, you're never going to be able to follow your budget, because the money you're spending, or, you know, either your values are out of whack, or you're, you know, with a budget, or your budget's out of whack with your values, right? It's the same with the moon works the same way, right? Like, sort of, I mean, not all about your values, but like what you're asking for is real and legitimate. And are you putting that, you know, what's going on with the energy, I guess, is the question I would ask myself. Like, what's going on with the energy of this? Like, do I really want this? You know, and yes, okay, why isn't it moving forward for me? If it's not moving forward, you know, and maybe it's not the right timing or something. So yeah, just to kind of use that to get into the deep, like, work of the revelatory work of the moon happens at this full moon period, usually either a couple days before, you know, kind of maybe over those 3 days of the moon coming to fruition. There's like the day before the full moon, the day of the full moon, the day after the full moon. And actually, tidally wise, the tides peak right before the full moon. I thought that was the tides move, something about the tides move before the moon because of something to do with the gravitational pull. So I thought that was like interesting, that they're ahead of the moon. So okay, so that's my talk on the moon's magic. Wow, I didn't realize it had been so long. I guess I was deep in the deep into the moon tonight.
I didn't even- I guess if what we're asking for isn't happening, why isn't it happening?
Yeah. Why
What's
is it happening, or
to make it
what's
not
going on? Yeah. What's really going on? You know, what's going on? And it could be, you know, like I say, it could be timing. Some things
Well,
don't
yeah, and
come. Yeah.
that's what I have to keep going back to
Yeah.
with this, you know, this chronic headache has been very many years. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
But what am I doing what I said I would? Am I doing what I think I should? But also I just, everything I'm getting is just, you know, patient. Everything's fine, just be patient. Everything's
Yeah.
fine, just be patient. Everything's fine, just be patient. I'm like, but it's hard, you know, when
Yeah.
I got kids in aftercare, and I don't know why, but it's often the ones that are there the longest that are the ones that have the most difficulty listening and, you know, following the rules and stuff,
Yeah.
because they're in school for so dang many hours. And I feel for the anyway, but it's 4:30 and, you know, my head's blowing up and I'm like, oh my God.
Oh,
Just breathe,
geez.
just breathe, it's all good.
Yeah. Sounds painful. Yeah, and I want to point, and hopefully I haven't done that, but like, this is why I say do it like an anthropologist in another culture. Like, don't blame yourself, right? It's not your
Right.
fault, right? It's not
Right.
it's like more like the self-exploratory exercise of of attempting to get a deep, because that might be a time of the month where you also get an answer, or where you also, find a new practitioner, or you know what I mean, something comes along that if you've been asking and asking your guides and asking your moon wheels, the full moon will often bring you those answers. You know what I mean? So
Well, one answer I got was just that, aftercare is, it's only a couple hours, and I'm allowed to be kind of fun with it and let the kids be silly and goofy, but they can't. Last Thursday it was so awful. I was just like, I don't even know if I can keep doing this. The kids were terrible and
oh geez, yeah.
just, being awful to me. I was walking, he was walking, and I was like,
Right.
what the hell? Don't be mouthing off to me. I'm not in the mood.
Yeah.
So today was much better, and it's kind of like, I'm going to respect myself.
Yeah.
Just that so the first time something happens, they just go sit down for a rest. Like, I'm not happy.
Well, yeah.
We've taken away, I used to let them answer the roll with silly things. And I said, no one's saying anything. We're not talking during this time because it got too silly. It got too, so, but it feels good. It feels like I'm going to take care of myself. I can't take that level of noise or silliness. Therefore, I'm going to run the class so that it doesn't happen.
I think that makes sense, especially with your experience. And in some ways, I was thinking like you're the moon for them, right? Right. You need to help them, right? You're there to help them regulate themselves, right? Like, and so, right. You need to take care of yourself. I agree, first and foremost. And, when you were in the Waldorf kindergarten classroom, you had the structure to do it that way, but this is a different.
It's very different.
Yeah.
And part of me is my own stuff with, they don't get to play in Montessori.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important that they do play, that I want to put a lot of that in, but I just can't, I can't do it. That's okay. It's okay. Like, my job is not to replace play for them.
Right.
My job is to have a peaceful, calm, kind.
Right. Keep them safe after school until the parents get them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Thursday, like, I had my 4-year-olds that usually are fine running around in circles. And I'm like, what the?
Wow.
We're inside. Run around in circles.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Anyway, but it was interesting how, anyway, realizing that I need to do it that way for myself. And then it's for them, right? Who wants a grumpy answer? Like, that's do anybody.
Right. It is for them. Yeah. I mean, I see that. It'll make it a happier environment for everybody.
Yeah. It's well, but the wait, not too good at waiting.
Yeah.
pretty much an Aries.
Spoken like a true Aries. Like, I'm not very good at waiting. I'm not very patient either.
My whole life, I've been really good at making things happen, making jobs happen, making the job I want in the school where I am happen, right. And for the first time, I just didn't. And I'm doing that again now. It's like, what's meant to be will be. Maybe you only need to work 3 hours a day. Somehow the universe is going to make that okay. If that won't work, then something else will happen, because I have all these ideas. Oh, well, I could offer to do this, and I could no, nothing.
Yeah, good for you.
Hard, but
yeah.
I'm practicing new things.
Nice. Well,
I just had a quick question. Barbara, do you have a practitioner that you're working with that you trust and all of that?
No, I mean, yes, no, maybe so. I have a primary care physician, and we do nothing with the headaches there. Right now I'm working with a chiropractor who's done magic things with my hip. It's not cured, but it's much, much better.
Yeah.
And we've talked a little bit about the headaches. Yeah, I've done many things over the years, and it's just, I guess I'm just waiting to see. I have this feeling, and my sister Anna said the same thing, like whatever the need for these headaches is already gone on a spiritual level, just hasn't worked its way down yet.
Right. Right.
And I kind of have that feeling, but I'm ready for the physical.
Yeah.
So over the years, I've done a lot of things. I've done diet, I've done a lot of acupuncture, I've done a lot of massage, and nothing has helped. You know, it hasn't changed dramatically.
Mm.
Which doesn't mean none of those things will help now. I mean, I've done a lot of work with chiropractors before too. So yeah, no, I don't have anyone. I think I'm a little bit hesitant to trust. Trust is, oh, I did this Red Cross training thing, and part of it is the choking. And there was a guy there, and the lady's like, okay, if any, you know, you can pass this without touching another person if you don't want to touch, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden I was like, I cannot touch him. He cannot touch me. He was a perfectly nice guy. I mean, there was nothing, right? Because some people you meet and you go, oh, there wasn't that. I was just like, don't touch me. So I went, she was amazing, very young woman. I said, I can touch women and vice, but not men. She's like, okay. Yeah. So she just arranges the whole thing, doesn't say anything. Okay, you go with her. Okay, you go with it. Blah, blah, blah. No one ever knew that she did it without me, you know. But I was like, whoa. So yeah, I'm working on some trust stuff apparently as well.
Oh, okay.
No, and high anxiety for doctors and practitioners, you know, is fairly new for me, but it's been wild. And this guy is fine. But often, like I have a woman dentist, I have to have, you know, I don't know. Anyway.
That's an interesting thing to look at. Yeah.
Yeah. My chiropractor is a man, and he is older. Generally, if they're very young men, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Like my kids' age, which, you know, obviously my issues with men have been men my age or older.
Yeah.
Just when I think about it, I was like, oh yeah, well, that makes sense. And the chiropractor's okay, but yeah. So I don't know. I'll think about that, Angie.
Yeah,
Like,
I just was curious. I didn't know what all you've tried. I'm sure you've tried everything, you know. I
well,
was
no one's tried everything really, and not at the right time. That's the other piece.
yeah.
You know,
I mean, I know for me, you know, I drink a ton of water. I drink like a gallon of water every day. Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
that
I
has
try
really
to drink 92.
good.
Wow.
Because
I mean,
I'm big.
I think
I'm a
water
big-
is a really powerful healer, you know. And but in addition to that, I just want to throw out this doctor, Virginia Beach, Virginia, who's a chiropractor, but he does the frequency sprays. He does a diagnosis with you over the phone. It's on a phone consult. He's wonderful. Just the whole office staff is so supportive. And he does these frequency sprays, and they've really helped my daughter heal through a lot of things. And it's just something, I'm just going to throw it out there. I know that you've got a lot that you're doing, but I'd be happy to send you his information if
All
you're,
right.
you know, just to kind of research it a little.
Yeah, I would like to have the other thing I did when my headaches first started was work with an allergist. And he did kind of the homeopathic thing where you find out all the things you're allergic to, and then they do drops, just a minuscule drops under the tongue. And yet I did, and then he had some kind of a shot that I did for a while. And then I moved to Arizona and I couldn't find anyone who did it. That seemed to be better, but nothing like really made it go
away. Yeah.
I was like, well, it's not time yet, you know.
Well, I'll send you the information through I think we have a little group text or something like that.
Yeah,
that I'll send it to you. And I'll keep you in my prayers too. I'm sorry. It's hard to be hurting, all the
Yeah.
time. Chronic pain is really hard to live with. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's so interesting. Like I can go for a long time and it's just kind of fine. It just is what it is. Well, I'm just been out of patience for the last 2
I get
years.
it.
I'm just done.
Yeah, I get it.
But
I totally get
maybe
it.
because it's almost time, so
Yeah.
we'll be hopeful.
And then
Right.
I have one question for you, Sydney. You talked a
Sure.
little bit about the chakras, and I
Uh-huh.
was kind of interested. So tonight we talked a little bit about the literal, the creative, the paradoxical, the symbolic.
Hmm.
If you were to place those items thinking about the moon in the chakra system, you said the paradoxical would line up with the heart.
Yes.
Would the creative be more where the reproduction is? Because that's how we create, would it be in that lower chakra? Would you
Well, that's a
consider
good question.
creative in a higher level? I mean, I've always thought about creativity as giving birth to something
Right.
and thinking about the sacral chakra. But then when you think about creativity, you said those lower chakras have to do about the past, and creative energy is more
Mm,
future. And then also the symbolic,
interesting. Yeah.
I'm thinking like for me, it's a lot of it is the Anja chakra, the third eye,
Hmm.
symbolically, what I visualize and what I
Mm,
see. Um, and then the literal, I'm thinking the root chakra, would that be the root? Like the
yeah.
basis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 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 More in terms of the structure of the body and like thinking about not so much maybe I mean, I hear what you're saying with the creative and like the first and second chakras. Okay, the creative would be the upper chakras, the fifth, sixth, and seventh level of the temple, but partially because the chakras develop with human development. I know we talked about that a while back, but right, the first, second, right, the chakras grow in relationship to our childhood environment. So, if you have, again, kind of back to that secure attachment, if you have like a securely attached, situation, your chakras can get to an optimal age, and then but they can also not fully mature also because of circumstances. And so I think if you're thinking about like developing your awareness of kind of the different vibrations of spirit, the more material, the more matter oriented ones being like the root and second chakra, and then the finer ones, your thinking being your third chakra, your second feeling, or your love, your compassion, the stuff related to the heart, and then your word, right? The energy gets a little more refined towards, let's say, God, but Mother Earth is a spiritual energy, Earth is also a spiritual, so I think that's interesting that you said that, because I think that could be seen as a paradoxical thing too, is that our creative centers are in the lower chakras, and our, these our ability to perceive the symbols, I think you're right, it's definitely a third eye. Right, that ability to discern the symbols and to follow the mystery is third eye work, definitely. So, yeah, so those
I
are
guess
great
I was
questions.
thinking, like the lower chakras being more dense, whereas the higher chakras are more subtle. It's
Those are
there,
good words.
you know
Those
what
are
I
good
mean?
words. Yeah.
But
Yeah, good
I
words.
thought that was really interesting how you tapped in with the moon with those two. And
Oh,
so,
thank you.
and then the new moon, the first quarter, the full and the last, seeing those through that lens as well. It's really interesting. So
Oh,
thank you
thank you.
so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Take
Thank you
care of
all.
yourself, Barbara.
Yeah, yeah, take
Oh,
care of
thanks,
all.
Bye.
Sarah.
Yeah,
Have
it's
a
great
great
to see you
evening.
all. Yeah, you too. Have a great night.
Good night, ladies.
Good
Good
night.
night.
It's good to see you.
I know, it's good to see you. I owe you
Yeah.
a call. Are you busy in
Okay.
the morning or you want to talk tonight?
I think I'm not available either. My
Okay.
cousin just got here and she's from Seattle and or wherever she lives in Washington somewhere. Yeah, so I'm gonna go have dinner with them and I don't think I'll be available tomorrow either. But Wednesday, are you
Okay.
available Wednesday? Okay, Wednesday or
think so.
Thursday? Okay, cool.
Have fun. Have a good dinner.
Thank you. Yeah,
I'm excited you finished your book.
yeah, it's exciting. Woohoo. Yeah,
Yay.
I'm still doing a little tweaking, but it's getting it's like, oh, there's more steps before you.
It's gonna be
But it's
great.
okay. It's gonna be great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's great to see you.
It's so good to see you. Tell Scott I said hi and you guys have a great dinner.
Okay, I will do that. Okay. Thanks. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.